Books with Brookes. Hello, I am Brookes. Happy Friday. It is October 4th, and this month we're reading The Shining by Stephen King. It's a spooky, spooky thriller, and the inspiration for what many people say is the greatest horror movie of all time of the same name, The Shining. I hope you're all enjoying it and that you're not too scared. I have finished reading it. Honestly, once I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. It went really fast. There won't be any spoilers in this podcast, so don't worry. But this Friday episode is what I like to call a check-in episode, because I've announced the book a few weeks ago. You've had a little bit of time to read it, so maybe you're in the middle of it or you haven't picked it up yet and you need more inspiration. So I want to talk about a topic that is sort of like theme adjacent to whatever we are reading this month or in any particular month. So this time, let's heckin' talk about Stephen King. Who even is this dude? He's been writing books like longer than most of us have been alive, and he turns them out. It's just one after the other, and it's bestseller after bestseller after bestseller. He cray. Example. He just released a brand new book this month. It's called The Institute. It's getting rave reviews. And like yesterday or 2 days ago, he announced that he has another book coming out in May of next year called If It Bleeds. What? How does he do that? That's insane. That's so many books. Just banging them out. Yeah, Stephen King's an icon. He's got to be one of the most influential writers of the modern age. And it's not just books. He's also influential in film and TV and all over the place. He does a ton of stuff. It's actually outrageous. It's so crazy. Also, he lives in Maine, and I think he's a true weirdo. And I am here for it. Honestly, the more I read about him and the more I find out about him, I'm like, yeah, this dude's living his best life. He does whatever the fuck he wants. That's awesome. So let's go through a couple fun facts about Stephen King. He was born in 1947 on September 21st, which means he just turned 72. Happy belated birthday, Mr. King. He was born in Portland, Maine. Shout out to Portland, Maine. I was just there for a week, all last week. So hello to all my pals who I saw while I was in Portland. It's a cool city. The weather was great while I was there, so that was cool. He lives now in Bangor, Maine, which is like north of Portland, and it's inland from Bar Harbor. My friends say his house is very spooky, and I did Google it. You can Google what it looks like. It's a big Victorian mansion, and it has like a wrought iron gate, like fence in the front, and it is spider webs with spiders on it. So that's amazing. Honestly, the more I read about this dude, I'm like, yeah, like this is who we all need to be. I mean, obviously like hugely successful authors, but more than that, just like people doing what they love and having fun at it. Like he seems like he's having a great time. He was raised by his mom, who's a single mom after his dad left. And here's a crazy story. Apparently, when he was a little kid, don't know what age, but little, he saw one of his friends get hit and killed by a train. Although apparently he doesn't remember it. I'm sure that's a coping mechanism. But he went out to play, and then he came home and he was in shock and he couldn't speak. And then later they found out the friend he'd been playing with died by getting hit by a train. Obviously, people speculate that this like psychologically damaged him and maybe inspired him to write some spooky horror stuff, but I guess he doesn't say that, and there's nothing about it in a memoir called On Writing, which, shout out to my dad, is my dad's favorite book and says we should all read. It's a nonfiction book about writing. So that is kind of crazy. He says that when he was little, he found a collection of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft called The Lurker in the Shadows. And he says, and I quote, "I knew that I'd found home when I read that book." So he knew at a really young age, I guess, what he wanted to do and what he wanted to write about. He has a degree in English from the University of Maine. He graduated in 1970. He married his wife Tabitha around that time, and they're still married. They have 3 kids. He apparently likes Batman better than Superman, which is really not surprising because bats are way creepier. Like, obviously, Stephen King would like Batman better than Superman. Duh. In 1999, he was hit by a van while he was walking along the side of the road, and he was severely injured. Obviously, he survived, but he then bought the van for $1,500 and to keep it from being sold on eBay. And he said that he wanted to smash it. So that's awesome. In 2006, he said that he doesn't use cell phones. And I think that was adjacent. He wrote a story about like people who own cell phones, like becoming like mindless zombie killers, and said like, oh, I don't use a cell phone. I feel like that's got to be different now. It's 2019. We all have smartphones. But my greatest evidence for that is that he's on Twitter. So what do you tweet from your desktop? You know what I mean? Like he probably has a phone. He actually had a tweet recently that went kind of viral, and this is it. I'll read it to you. Want a little bedtime story? My friend felt he had a hair caught between his eye and his glasses. He couldn't get rid of it, so he looked in the mirror. A tick was crawling on his eyeball. Nighty-night, sleep well. That's so awesome. And obviously really, really upsetting, which I think is a pretty good summation of a ton of what he writes. It's really awesome and really upsetting. Apparently in 2018, there was a movement in Maine to have him run for governor of Maine. He didn't do it, but he's a pretty outspoken Democrat. He has made comments about, you know, the wealthy needing to pay more taxes. He's spoken out against Trump. And other Republican senators. I think he's pretty involved in local politics up in Maine, kind of throughout New England. He's estimated to be worth $400 million, which obviously makes him one of the richest authors in the world. His website is hilarious. I recommend everyone visit it. It looks like it's from 1999, and it just has like a ton of different things. And you can kind of tell, like, he wrote it, but it's like he tried to make it look like someone else wrote it. So, like, the tenses are all off, and it'll be like, well, Stephen King, like, blah, blah, blah. But then there will be parts where it's like he just speaks in the first person. So I really like it. There's a really fun FAQ section that I was giggling reading, and here are a couple of the good ones. There's one, the question is simply, are you dead? And the answer just says, nope. There's one question, do you really have a haunted house at your house on Halloween? And the answer is, absolutely not. Don't come to my house on Halloween. Question, why did you become a writer? Answer, the answer to that is fairly simple. There was nothing else I was made to do. I was made to write stories, and I love to write stories. That's why I do it. I really can't imagine doing anything else, and I can't imagine not doing what I do. Okay, I don't want to get weird, but I like actually teared up when I read that the first time, because isn't that what we all want? To just do something that we feel like, wow, this is 100% what I was made to do. I have no regrets. This is awesome. Obviously, like, Stephen King has had a massive amount of success, so that's really lucky. But I get the impression this dude was gonna do this no matter what. Like, he's gonna write these stories. He was gonna, like, be a writer. It's just in him, and it's coming out, and that's so cool. Those are some fun facts about Stephen King, the person. Now let's talk about Stephen King, the books. So to date, he has published, not written, because I'm sure he's written more than this, but he has published 61 novels. Okay. And 6 nonfiction books. So that's 67 books. You guys, he's only 72. That's almost a book a year. What? That's okay. What have you done 72 times? honestly. I can't think of anything. That's crazy. That's so cool. His first novel was Carrie. Well, his first published novel was Carrie. It was published in 1973. He actually wrote it on his wife Tabitha's typewriter. And when it was bought initially, his editor sent him a telegram because his phone was out. And the telegram read, "Carrie officially a Doubleday book. $2,500 advance against royalties. Congrats, kid. The future lies ahead. Bill." What? That's so cool. Doubleday was, I guess, the publisher at the time. Wow. A telegram? What? That's how long he's been writing. So this is something cool and funny. And we've seen this play out with other like extremely famous authors, like J.K. Rowling, for example. But in the 80s, he started writing under a pseudonym, Richard Bachman. And I think similarly to J.K. Rowling, like it was to test and see if his writing would like still be well received, if it would stand up without his name attached to it. He gives another reason, which is something like because there were publishing rules at the time that said you could only release one book per year. So he needed to do it to get around those rules. But I think really it was because, you know, he wanted to see like, am I a good writer anymore? Or are people just like, they know my name and that's why I'm having success. So that's kind of cool. But then he was found out, as you do, and he issued a press release saying that Richard Bachman had died and his cause of death was cancer of the pseudonym, which is really funny. He just seems to have an amazing sense of humor. Like this guy is giggling at all of us all the time. He's having fun. But he still, like, sometimes he'll credit Richard Bachman, or he uses that name Bachman quite a bit. It's kind of sounds like it's a little bit of like an alter ego. In 2017, he published a book set in a West Virginia women's prison, actually. Shout out to West Virginia. Hi, Mom. And he co-wrote it with his son, Owen, who's also an author. So that's like cute as heck. It's heckin' really cute. He says, the key to being an author is read and write 4 to 6 hours a day. If you cannot find the time for that, you can't expect to become a good writer. So I guess that's the rule, guys. Now we all have to follow it. Wouldn't it be great to have 4 to 6 hours a day to read and write? Like, give me that. His definition for talent in writing is if you wrote something for which someone sent you a check, if you cashed the check and it didn't bounce, and if you then paid the light bill with the money, I consider you talented. And you know what? That means a lot of you guys, a lot of my friends are talented writers. And that makes me really happy. In Stephen King's eye, a lot of you guys are killing it with writing. So good job. I'm not even going to get into all the literary awards he's won. It's a lot. It's a lot. Just know there's a lot. And his books have sold more than 350 million copies. So, legend, okay? All right, let's move on to other mediums aside from books. For example, music. Fun facts about Stephen King and music. In 1996, he collaborated with Michael Jackson to create Ghosts, a 40-minute musical video. So, what? All right. He owns a local rock and roll radio station in Bangor called WKIT 100.3, Stephen King's rock and roll station. And their tagline appears to be streaming live to the undead. And you can listen online, so Google it. I was listening to it earlier. He plays guitar for a rock group called the Rock Bottom Remainders, and it has a ton of other writers and authors in it. Dave Barry, Mitch Albom, Matt Groening, tons more. And he wrote a musical play called Ghost Brothers of Darkland County in 2012, and he wrote that with John Mellencamp. This guy, killing it. All right, let's talk about films. Here are some famous movies by Stephen King. Carrie, The Shining, Children of the Corn, Cujo, The Dark Tower, The Green Mile, It and It Chapter 2, Misery, which is my mom's favorite movie. It stars Kathy Bates. The Mist. Pet Sematary. There are 2 versions. They just remade it. The Shawshank Redemption. The Shining. 1408. 1922. And tons more that I'm not very familiar with, and I'm really sorry if I left off your favorite. But those are just a few of the really famous movies that are based on Stephen King books. He has directed, he tried his hand at directing Maximum Overdrive, and also he likes to make cameo appearances in movies, which kind of reminds me of Stan Lee with like Marvel Comics and Marvel movies. So he was in Maximum Overdrive. He produced and acted in a television series called Kingdom Hospital. I don't know when that was. Didn't see it. Let me know if you did. Kingdom Hospital. He had a cameo on the FX series Sons of Anarchy, where he played a cleaner named Bachman. So that's a callback to his pen name, his pseudonym, Richard Bachman. There was a sci-fi series based on his novella, The Colorado Kid. And then I guess which I haven't seen it, but he does have a cameo as a thrift store owner in It Chapter 2, which just came out. So let me know if you saw it and if you spotted him. He's rather distinctive looking, so perhaps you noticed his face. Yeah, obviously, okay, I didn't say everything there is to know about Stephen King. He's had an insanely long career. He does a ton of stuff. He's really active. He writes crazy numbers of books, almost 1 book for every year of his life. There's just so much. There's so much stuff. Like, look him up, read about him. He's fascinating. The more that I read about him after finishing The Shining, I think I am going to officially consider myself a Stephen King stan. Before this, I'd only read The Gunslinger, which is the first in the Dark Tower series. And now I've read The Shining. Of the movies, what have I seen? I've only seen The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, probably. Oh, no, I've seen Misery. Yeah, I've seen Misery. My mom loves that movie. Really freaked me out. So I've seen a few of the movies. Obviously, they're all great. All of them are wonderful. Yeah, I think I'm officially, I'm gonna put myself into the Stephen King fan club. Okay. And I know my dad loves the nonfiction book on writing, which is about writing, obviously. So that would be a really cool one to read. Perhaps I'll try to get my hands on that. I would love to hear what your favorite Stephen King books and movies are. Please tell me. You can email me at podcast@bookswithbrooks.com. Don't forget that Brooks has an E in it. Or you can find me on Instagram, Books with Brooks. Again, there's an E. Let me know what you love about Stephen King. He's a hilarious guy. He's always doing weird stuff. I'm so here for it. Weird is so good. And let me know how you're doing on The Shining. We will be back at the end of the month to discuss it in further detail. I want to watch The Shining, and I have grand plans to do a podcast episode about The Shining in popular culture, because it's everywhere. There's callbacks to The Shining all over the place and inspiration from The Shining. So it's a famous movie that sort of like, I think, set the tone for a whole genre for a really long time. So yeah, I'll be back next week. We will announce the November book, so look out for that. Thank you so much for listening. Don't get too scared. Happy early Halloween. Books with Brooks is in the Press Play Podcast Network, and our theme music is by Jonathan Allen.